Okay, we're covering chapter 12, the last part of chapter 12 in the book of Revelations, which will be followed up by the famous chapter 13, where we talk about the beast, which is one of the most provocative scriptures in the entire Bible. But here we're talking about it's talking about the dragon was in heaven. And what was the dragon doing in heaven? Okay, heaven consists in our consciousness of the higher centers. The head center and the heart are, are the consciousness of heaven within the disciple. And when the person begins his lives, he still has the seven centers going for himself. But the higher centers are controlled by the dragon because he has not accessed them yet. So the higher centers are suppressed by the great dragon. So the dragon is actually in heaven, and he controls these centers. He controls the whole thing. And so when the disciple finally awakens and opens his heart and head centers, he casts the dragon out of heaven, and the dragon then falls to the earth. And then it says, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, that ye that dwell in them. Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth, for the devil has come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth he hath but a short time. So when the disciple is then governed by the soul, he throws the dragon uh, away from the higher centers. Yet the dragon has no power over the higher centers anymore. The higher centers are now open. The disciple makes his decisions from pure reason in the head and pure love in the heart, and the dragon is cast out of heaven, and he's totally very angry now because he's cast out. He's cast out of the disciple. So what does he do? He it says, woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. So of the earth is symbolizing the material forces of the earth. The sea represents the emotional forces. So because the dragon no longer has power over the disciple and any associates the disciple has that has also opened up the centers, he goes after those inhabitants of the earth and the sea, those that are focused on just the material side of life, which is most people, and the emotional side of life. They make their decisions based on emotion rather than pure reason. And he works with these people. So when the disciple begins any great work, he has to he's thrown the dragon out of his own personal consciousness, but the dragon is still represents the material forces of the world and the emotional forces of the world, and comes against him to frustrate his work. Okay. And if he can't, if he can't attack the disciple directly, he will go after those close to the disciple. And he doesn't leave the disciple alone. What's interesting about Jesus after the temptations in the wilderness, when it says when the devil left him, it said he left him for a season. Okay, so here was Jesus, had all his centers perfectly open, but still the dragon or the devil or whatever you want to call him didn't leave him permanently. It says in Luke that he left him for a season. In other words, the dragon was still keeping his eye even on Jesus, looking for an opening so he could get in there and ascend back to the heaven within and turn it back into a hell again. And so he if he only left Jesus alone for a season, we can't depend on just throwing out uh, the negative forces out of our consciousness and just relaxing. It's a little bit like Jefferson or Franklin or Jefferson said about freedom, that we must be eternally vigilant or else we can lose it. And the same thing with higher consciousness. The disciple has to be eternally vigilant or he could lose that higher consciousness. Okay, any comment on that?
So does the dragon also represent internal conflict?
Well, it produces an internal conflict because uh, we don't really cast the dragon out of our higher consciousness all in one fell swoop. It's degrees, and after he is cast out, then he seeks a way to come back in. Even with Jesus, it said he left him for a season. In other words, he kept an eye on Jesus throughout his whole ministry, looking for an opening. Even the master, uh, even the master was beyond the possibility of creating an opening for him to return. And when he does return, then yeah, there's internal conflict. And when there's internal conflict, then outer conflict follows. So it's important to keep the internal conflict to a minimum. Okay, the next thing he does, he seeks to I got wrong the wrong page here. Okay, the next verse reads, "And when the dragon saw that he was cast out to the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child." Okay, the man child had already ascended to heaven. That is, the creation ascended to come from the spiritual world of spiritual ideas, and it remains there. But the dragon saw he was cast to the earth, and he persecuted the woman. The woman is the female energy, which is often overlooked. In producing a creation between male and female, you have the man send the seed, but the woman has to receive it and nurture it. And this is what happens with any great work that's started by initiate. Uh, it's like a seed. And matter of fact, Christ presented himself as being a sower of the seed, and the seed fell in different types of ground and did different things. So the female energy captures that seed and nurtures it and brings it to fruition. If there's just male energy, the ideas are put out there, they may be accepted for a while, but without the strong female energy, it fades away or is altered. So it doesn't really manifest as anticipated. And so to preserve his power here, the dragon stirs those up who are centered in the emotional nature and the material nature, and this is the way he persecutes the woman to prevent the manifestation of the work. And so we can go back to Christ. He presented the great ideas. The people he presented it to are like the female energy that nurtured it, okay? And those that were nurturing the ideas that he presented were attacked. They tried to kill them, they tried to destroy them. And the power of the dragon did. and they were frustrated in every way possible. And so this is what happened. This fulfills a verse that he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man child. And then the next verse, and to the woman were given two great wings of an eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and a half a time from the face of the serpent. Okay, the wings of an eagle, the wings represent power, power to fly in the air, and air represents mind and thought. And so the woman was given great power of thought to be able to save herself. And so they did things to preserve the ideas. The Essenes, for instance, created all these manuscripts that they hid away, and now they've been discovered again. So what was hidden in darkness has come to light, and the ideas of love presented by Christ, they were suffocated to the point that those who did preach the love of Christ were burned at the stake and persecuted, thrown to the lions. All kinds of things happened to them, not only from the Roman Empire, but when Christianity got control, they persecuted people as heretics that taught the pure message of Christ. But they were nourished during this time that the woman is in the wilderness. In other words, the pure creative force is unable to give birth to the divine ideas presented by the initiates, and so they go through a period where the concepts are in the wilderness. And just take one concept, which is the divine love that Jesus preached. It was alive and well while he was here, for a short time after he left, and then instead of love, they used the quotation about Jesus said to go get a sword type of thing, and they taught the opposite of love, that if somebody didn't obey the gospel according to their dictates, then they needed to be burned at the stake or persecuted or beheaded or whatever. And so this but the ideas, the true ideas cannot be destroyed. And that's the great part about something that is true. If something is not true, it can be totally obliterated by just turning on a light. But if something is true, turning on a light just enhances its power. And if there is total darkness, it is still there even in the darkness. If something is true, it cannot be destroyed. And this is what happens when it says that the woman is in the wilderness for times and times and a half a time. And this time and times and a half a time in the Greek, a time refers to one cycle, times is two cycles, and a half a time is a half a cycle. So that's 3.5 cycles. 3.5 years equals 1,260 days. And this 3.5 cycles just keep showing up again and again, but written in different languages. So the woman is in the wilderness for 3.5 cycles. After 3.5 cycles, then she comes out of the wilderness. So the dragon is unable to keep the truth in darkness forever. But while it's in darkness, it says she's nourished. Okay, so even when the truth is in darkness, there's a handful of true disciples that nourish the work and continue to think about it and talk about it and make plans when the light will surface again. And this, we can see that this happens in a number of things. Now, what's interesting about it says that the woman had two wings of a great eagle. One of the symbolic teachings of this is the United States itself. On the back of the $1 bill, what do we see?
An eagle,
Eagle with two great wings.
wings.
Eagle. Yeah. And so this applies to the United States. In the United States as foundation, we had great initiates come forward. Yeah, two great wings of an eagle.
Yeah. On your dollar, on a silver dollar, they're hard to get, but if you get them, they've got the same trademark.
Yeah, good. Glad you had that. And also in the dollar back of the dollar bill. So we had the foundation of the country, great ideas presented, but then after the country got going, while a lot of forces come together to suppress those ideas, and a lot of the more and more uh, the a lot of the best ideas of the Constitution have gone into the wilderness right now to a large degree. So we're at the end, I believe, at the end of the 3.5 cycles. We're near the end of it, where we will be soon coming out of the wilderness, because the great ideas that the founding fathers put forward cannot be destroyed, and they are registering in people's minds. And during this period where we've been in the wilderness with the true principles of the Constitution, there's still a lot of people nourishing the ideas. A lot of people still talk about it, they study it, and are waiting at a time when we can come forward and be more united as a nation and focused on the true principles of freedom, the Bill of Rights, and really make the nation flourish the way the founders envisioned.
So the truth is like a seed that's planted in the dark recesses of your mind, but it's never destroyed. It's waiting to come to fruition.
Yeah. Now, the same happens to the disciple. As you, as an individual disciple, come up with ideas, you will have all kinds of things come in the way to prevent it to coming to fruition. But if you continue for the 3.5 cycles, and the reason they say 3.5 cycles is whenever you begin a project that's really going to accomplish anything, you think it's going to take one cycle to get it going. Well, you go through one cycle and you just got a lot more problems than you imagine. So you continue a second cycle, and then a third cycle, and then finally the half a cycle at the end is the cycle where you just continue until you bring it to fruition. So during these 3.5 cycles, in other words, to really complete a work of value, it winds up being about 3.5 times harder than you expected.
Boy, that's for sure. This book, I thought it would be done in a month. And after 3 months, I started leaning on him and saying, look, you guys, this is ridiculous. And so I got a team over there working on it. And in the last fourth month or half cycle, I got some sharp guys and they put it all together. And then it happened pretty quickly. But took much long. 4 months is a long time to get a book formatted.
Yeah, everything takes a lot longer than you expect. And if and I've always quoted that scripture, he that endures to the end shall be saved or delivered. And that's what you have to do. If you're doing a positive work for mankind, you have to endure. In other words, it's going to be a lot harder than you expect. It's like John, when he ate the little book in his mouth, it was as sweet as honey. But when it went to his belly, it became bitter, and this was his mission. So when he thought about his mission, when the disciple thinks about his mission, oh, this is going to be fun. We're going to have a really good time doing this. And the sweetest honey in his mouth when he thinks about it, when he first gets his mission and when he first begins to understand it. But then when he actually begins to do it, it's in his belly bitter because it's a lot harder than he expected it to be. And well, look at us trying to create a molecule. You'd think that'd be pretty easy to get 24 people that can have soul contact together. Piece of cake, right? And it's a fun idea. Let's go find those people. But it's at least 3.5 times harder than you would expect it to be. But any work of note is that way. Even if you're starting a business is always about 3.5 times harder and takes more work than you anticipated it to.
Never give up.
Yeah. Okay. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Okay, water represents what?
Emotions.
Ocean,
right. So the negative powers attack the work of light with emotional energy. And what the emotions do is they're not accurate. They reverse everything, they distort everything. So they'll take what the disciple is doing and say, hey man, this disciple is worse than the devil himself. Look at what he said. And then they'll misquote him and quote him so it makes him look a lot worse than he is. And so they use this emotional energy to distort the work and make it look like the devil. And it's like Jesus said to the disciples when he sent them out, he says, they will persecute you and kill you and think they are doing God's work in the process, because they will think that, in other words, he was telling them, the common people is going to think you're not from God, but from the devil. And so the beast is able to control the people with their emotions by affecting their emotions. And now these people are going to completely alter your way of life. So your way of life will be destroyed. So you need to destroy them before they destroy you. And thus he casts a flood of water out of his mouth to destroy the woman. But then it says the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. This is a curious statement because the earth represents the material, practical forces of the world. And so how was it that the earth counterbalances the flood of emotional distortion? Okay, let's look at Galileo. Galileo came forward to the Vatican scientists and says, look, I've got this telescope I created, and if you look through it, you can see evidence that the earth is not the center of the universe. The earth circulates around the sun according to everything that we see here. And they didn't even want to look through the telescope. And they were very emotionally upset, and they attacked him on emotional level, not on the mental level, but on the emotional level. They tried to destroy Galileo. But word got out, and word got out to earthy people that are practical, earthy. They weren't particularly spiritual or anything, but they said, well, let's look through it. Let's build a telescope by that, look through it and see if Galileo was right. And so they started checking it out, and all these non-spiritual but practical earthly people found that Galileo was correct. So the earth helped the woman. In other words, the practical people that centered on the earth were tested the things that the initiate brought forward, and they found that they were true. And this countered the emotional response. It didn't matter how much people hated Galileo, once enough practical people proved that Galileo was right, it didn't matter what their emotions were after that. Pretty soon it was accepted that Galileo was correct. So the earth helped the woman.
Nikola Tesla had the same thing. He was rallied against by Edison until he tapped into the World's Fair in, I think, Chicago or New York or wherever, harnessed Niagara Falls, and proved to the people without a doubt that alternating current was superior to direct current. But he had to prove it in the material, physical world.
Yeah, yeah. And the next verse is interesting. And the earth and the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the rest of her remnant of her seed, which keeps the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay, so what the dragon does, if he tries to destroy the initiate and his work with emotional energy, the earth helps the woman and overcomes this, so the truth becomes prevalent. But does that stop him? No, he looks around for other disciples and other workers of light to attack them. So it says he was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. And the remnant of her seed would be other people like Galileo came forward afterwards with other ideas, and they were persecuted. But the persecution didn't end with Galileo, or the persecution didn't end with Christ. The problems of advancement didn't end with Tesla. The dragon just keeps on attacking anyone that moves mankind in a forward direction. And the people who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Christ are people that recognize the true laws of the universe and are willing to use the forces of love to motivate themselves for service. Okay, I see your face on the screen. Scott, did you have something?
Oh, I'm just fascinated by this. It's stimulating my thoughts in a lot of different areas. As I listen to you talk about this, it seems that the Brotherhood of Darkness is, even though John in the Book of Revelations is talking about the steps of the disciple, this is a format that can be used for anything. It can scale up to the biggest thing or scale down to something smaller than the disciple. And this is the format that the Brotherhood of Darkness uses,
Yeah.
against all things.
Yeah, it's a principle that you create a work of light, and you just can't sit around and just let it suppose everything's going to work without any effort. You got to cross your T's, dot your I's, and then if you get it going successfully, the forces will look for other people that support you or other works that are supporting humanity, and they will attack them. And when they attack, they always try to demonize, to make the person look like the devil himself. And this happens again and again, starting with Christ. They compared him to Beelzebub, which was the devil of the Jews, basically, and said he performed his miracles because he was in cahoots with the devil. And so it starts there, and that idea hasn't stopped ever since. Okay, my friends, any other comments or questions before we wrap it up here?